South Korean President Lee Jae Myung has arrived in Ankara for a two-day official visit to Turkey, beginning with a formal welcoming ceremony at the presidential palace. The visit marks a new high-level engagement between Seoul and Ankara, bringing together two major regional economies with a long-standing partnership spanning defence, trade, technology cooperation and multilateral diplomacy. At the palace in Ankara, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan welcomed President Lee Jae Myung with full state honours. The ceremony opened with a wide shot of the two leaders meeting on the forecourt of the presidential complex. President Lee stepped forward as President Erdogan greeted him, reflecting the importance Ankara places on strengthening ties with South Korea at a time of shifting geopolitical and economic dynamics in both Asia and Europe. The two leaders then moved to the traditional welcoming position, where they shook hands in front of the assembled delegations and media. The handshake, captured in a tracking shot, underscored the formality of the visit and the commitment to deepening bilateral engagement. Both sides have signalled that the visit aims to reinforce cooperation in defence industries, energy, infrastructure development and emerging technologies. The ceremony continued as the national anthems of both countries were played. President Lee Jae Myung and President Erdogan stood side by side during the anthems, maintaining a composed posture as the military band performed. This moment signified the start of the official programme, marking the beginning of high-level talks expected to focus on strategic global issues, regional security assessments and economic collaboration. Following the anthem ceremony, the two leaders walked together down the blue carpet laid out for visiting heads of state. A tracking shot captured them proceeding along the ceremonial path, with the palace architecture serving as the backdrop. The blue carpet walk is a traditional element for visiting dignitaries in Turkey, symbolising official reception at the highest level. An aerial view later showed both presidents continuing along the carpeted route, emphasising the scale of the palace grounds and the full protocol accorded to the South Korean delegation. The aerial perspective also highlighted the coordination of the ceremonial units and the organisation of the event by the Turkish presidency. President Lee Jae Myung then saluted the Turkish Guard of Honour. The guard, dressed in full ceremonial uniform, stood at attention as the South Korean president acknowledged them. This part of the protocol is standard for visiting leaders, representing respect for Turkey's military institutions and the significance of the bilateral relationship. The two leaders continued down the carpet, as seen again from an aerial shot, before completing the inspection of the ceremonial formations. The movement of the delegations reflected the structured sequence of the welcoming ceremony, which is designed to emphasise the formality and diplomatic weight of the visit. A tracking shot captured the moment when President Lee Jae Myung and President Erdogan saluted both countries' delegations. Senior officials from South Korea and Turkey stood on opposite sides of the carpet, representing ministries, foreign affairs teams, economic advisers, and defence representatives expected to take part in the subsequent bilateral sessions. Their presence indicated that discussions are likely to cover a broad spectrum of cooperation areas. The ceremony concluded with a wide shot showing both leaders again shaking hands and posing for official photographs. This closing moment of the welcoming event is typically followed by private talks between the presidents, expanded delegation meetings, and joint statements or agreements depending on the outcomes of the discussions. President Lee's visit takes place at a time when South Korea continues to expand its diplomatic reach beyond Northeast Asia, deepening its role in global supply chains, defence technology partnerships, and energy diversification. Turkey, meanwhile, seeks to enhance ties across Asia, positioning itself as a bridge between Europe and the broader Indo-Pacific region. The meeting between President Lee Jae Myung and President Erdogan reflects these strategic ambitions. Although the raw material from the Turkish presidency offers only images of the opening ceremony, previous engagements between Seoul and Ankara suggest that the discussions during the visit may focus on several long-standing areas of cooperation. These include defence industry collaboration, where South Korean technology and Turkish production capacity have intersected in joint projects. South Korea has been a significant supplier of military vehicles and components to Turkey, and both governments have previously expressed interest in continued cooperation. Economic ties are another major pillar of the relationship. South Korea and Turkey have a free trade agreement that has supported bilateral commerce, including investments in mega projects such as transportation, infrastructure, energy facilities, and advanced manufacturing. Turkish companies have participated in South Korean-led projects, while South Korean firms have invested in Turkey's energy and construction sectors. The presidential-level talks are expected to reinforce these economic links and explore opportunities for expansion amid shifts in global supply chains. The visit also holds diplomatic importance. South Korea and Turkey share historical ties through their mutual involvement in the Korean War, where Turkish troops played a notable role. This legacy continues to influence people-to-people relations, cultural exchanges, and diplomatic goodwill between the two nations. The Ankara ceremony reflects this broader context, signalling mutual respect and ongoing cooperation. While the raw document does not include public remarks or joint statements, it is expected that both leaders will address regional and global developments during their private discussions. For South Korea, matters concerning stability on the Korean peninsula, regional security in East Asia, and global economic resilience remain central diplomatic themes. For Turkey, issues related to energy security, regional stability in the Middle East, and its relationships with partners across Asia and Europe are likely to be part of the conversation. President Lee's visit may also touch on cooperation within multilateral frameworks, including the G20, where both South Korea and Turkey participate in efforts to stabilize global markets and manage geopolitical tensions. Their shared interests in technological innovation, digital transformation, and sustainable development further contribute to the strategic relevance of the visit. The ceremonial sequences captured by the Turkish presidency underline the significance Ankara places on the occasion. From the initial greeting on the palace forecourt to the inspection of the Guard of Honor and the final posed photographs, every element reflects the formal atmosphere of a state visit and the level of protocol accorded to the South Korean president. Though no public statements were featured in the available material, such meetings typically result in a reaffirmation of bilateral cooperation. Past encounters between leaders of both countries have included commitments to strengthening defence ties, boosting mutual investments, and enhancing people-to-people connections through tourism, education, and cultural programmes. President Jae Myung's presence in Ankara also signals South Korea's continued engagement with partners beyond its immediate regional environment. As global realignments reshape international relations, Seoul has sought to broaden its network of strategic partners. Turkey's geopolitical position, expanding industrial potential, and active diplomacy make it a relevant partner for South Korea's outreach. The sequence of images further indicates that the visit adhered strictly to Turkish state protocol. The welcoming ceremony, the Guard of Honor inspection, and the final handshake all follow established formal procedures for visiting heads of state. Such protocol demonstrates the Turkish government's emphasis on diplomatic visibility and its intent to highlight bilateral relationships on the international stage. Following the ceremony, the leaders are expected to move into the official agenda, which commonly includes one-on-one talks, delegation meetings, and possibly a joint press appearance, depending on the nature of the agreements reached. These discussions typically provide an opportunity to assess existing cooperation, identify new areas of collaboration, and address any issues arising from regional or global developments. Given the timing of the visit, regional tensions in East Asia and ongoing crises in several global theatres may form part of the agenda. South Korea continues to monitor developments around the Korean peninsula, while Turkey remains actively involved in diplomatic efforts related to regional conflicts, security initiatives, and humanitarian response. High-level discussions between the two presidents often provide a platform for exchanging views on such issues and coordinating positions in international forums. In the broader context, the relationship between South Korea and Turkey is supported by strong public sentiment in both countries. The shared historical memory of Turkish soldiers fighting in the Korean War remains a symbolic foundation for the partnership. Cultural exchanges, increasing tourism flows, and expanding educational cooperation contribute to the strength of the bilateral relationship beyond its economic and strategic dimensions. The visual documentation of today's ceremony in Ankara captures the essential elements of a state visit: the arrival, the greeting, the handshake, the playing of national anthems, the walk along the ceremonial route, the inspection of the Guard of Honour, and the final photographic moment. Each step reflects the seriousness and formality of the diplomatic engagement. Although the footage provided does not include statements from either leader, it is standard for such visits to conclude with an evaluation of discussions and, in some cases, the announcement of agreements or joint initiatives. These may involve defence cooperation, trade expansion, infrastructure development, or technology partnerships. The visit may also include cultural or educational components aimed at strengthening soft power ties. President Jae Myung's two-day schedule in Turkey is expected to include meetings beyond the welcoming ceremony, potentially involving ministers, business leaders, or joint delegations focused on specific sectors. Such engagements typically support broader diplomatic objectives by identifying practical avenues for cooperation. At the close of the ceremony, the final handshake and the posed photographs symbolise the formal launch of the visit's diplomatic agenda. As the delegations proceed into their meetings, both governments aim to reaffirm the strength of their partnership and identify concrete steps for deepening cooperation. The imagery from Ankara illustrates the importance of this high-level engagement and the continued effort by both nations to advance their strategic and economic relationship. The next stages of the visit will determine the specific outcomes, but the ceremonial beginning reflects a clear commitment to maintaining and expanding bilateral ties. This concludes the formal overview of South Korean President Jae Myung's welcoming ceremony in Ankara as he begins his official visit to Turkey and prepares for discussions with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on future cooperation between their two nations.